It no be one a photo. Say we dey fight.
It is the senior most community pharmacist, Dr. Tuli.
Tompo Asembeng.
Oh, no lie. Then I say if your driver can't pick you, I make you people give me lift go. Shark is inside now. I'm at say so on link copy. But
Tompo, 11 p.m.
Oh, if it comes to a seed in the who give me. I guess some entanglement before that side.
You know they hear social distancing, eh?
To lepe from D, same crowd, the whole. As I be young in the Emmas are they cool. If you no go pick me to catch them in small left.
See, this be the problem. Who tell you say corona affects youngins? If you know they care about your life, if a guy say NSW over 50 years, away gets hypertension, way poppy to be diabetic. Charlie them their go mess them up.
You are go wear face shield.
And that changes anything? That thing they protect only your eyes.
Plus face mask.
Charlie, the youth will take this thing for granted. It may not kill you, but if it give you long-term damage to vital organs like your lungs, if you go get for outside cargo house, they give your OGs where them die, will you be able to fend for yourself?
Chama, so I can say because unless I start they do Yahoo, I enter Benino, na funeral cost me this the COVID says make it left one at top. Who?
If people know they follow simple directions like social distancing, hand washing, wearing face mask and things, the COVID don't go anywhere. And the way they make careless there, it be like you no go left with anytime soon.
So to you say my shadow make beans eh?
If you love yourself and the people around you, they house and take your shadow go do go back cry.
You are here, you more like dog me. So they kill my cry.
But we for take responsibility and keep fighting with positivity.
Hi, welcome to the very first episode of Reflections GH. We are so excited to bring this show to all of you. This is a project we conceptualized as a bi-weekly live discussion show focusing on some of the most pressing social issues in Ghana. The idea is to help highlight issues that many people are already talking about. So this is not a revolutionary kind of thing, obviously, but for several reasons, there's a lot of social issues that don't get the mainstream attention they deserve, which becomes also a matter of social justice. So there's a lot of issues that, in terms of particularly, right, specifically the Ghanaian society, do not get attention, although there's a lot of people who are talking about some of these issues. So that's the idea behind this project. And as much as we can, it will be a bi-weekly discussion. This is the very first episode, right? So today, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about how to engage in productive dialogue on social media. As COVID-19 continues to disrupt our lives and the need for social or physical distancing from other people becoming really crucial, social media is one of the avenues for maintaining social connections. However, as any social media user would attest to, the use of social media sometimes can feel like war, right? When you're engaging with other people, due to the fact that we come from so many different backgrounds, have so many different experiences. We are always going to have differences of opinion with other people, right? The question though is, how do we civically and productively engage with others on social media in spite of all our differences? To discuss this, I have my co-host with me. So let's take note of this. We are not guests, right? We are all of us today, particularly our co-hosts. So we are going to be your regular co-hosts for the show. And I have my co-hosts with me, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks, Eric, for such an elaborate introduction. My name is Dr. Godfrey Asante. I am an assistant professor at San Diego State University in California. And my main area of research is intercultural communication, specifically with regards to dialogue. So I'm really, I'm particularly excited for this, for this initial program, I would say. So yeah, that's it.
I actually forgot to introduce myself.
Right.
My name is Dr. Eric Karikari. I am an assistant professor at Towson University in Maryland. and I study organizational communication and leadership. And that's also my area of teaching. So that's what I teach. I teach classes in what we call organizational communication. I teach classes in leadership communication, business and professional communication, and so on. So I apologize for assuming and not introducing myself in that first instance. So Dr. Asante, would you begin with the questions?
Absolutely, and I do want to mention, this is going to be quite informal. So this is not like we are hoping that we will not treat this as like our classrooms or per se, but this is going to be very informal, sharing experiences and sharing information across as well. So the first question that we have that we would like to talk about, and just so we all know, and Eric, I know maybe if you want to mention, we do have a third host who's having internet issues right now. So it's possible that she might be able to join us eventually, as you saw in the poster. So the first question that we want to go over is what it means to have a productive dialogue. So before we even delve into talking about having a dialogue online, we do want to first talk about what does it actually mean to have a productive dialogue. And from there, we can shift to talking about that in a specific context, such as these social media contexts. So Eric, yes, if you want to start, and then I can continue from there.
Well, yeah, thank you. So my initial thoughts and my initial reaction is kind of like emphasizing what productive is. What in this instance, productive, right? Mm-hmm. Are we talking about productive as in economically productive, productive use of your time, productive in terms of the kind of civic engagement or civil engagement, right? That right. we ultimately would want to have on social media. So for me, I would emphasize productive, and for me, right, productive would be not a waste of your time, not a waste of your ideas, not a waste of that. If you are a prepaid customer, for instance, you are not a waste of your bandwidth, right? That you're paying for. Once you're on social media and you're paying for this you're paying to be online, right? And you're using social media. You don't want to engage in conversations or interactions that are ultimately a waste of your time, a waste of your money, right? In terms of how much you're paying for. And so that's what I would say about the productive aspect of it. But dialogue is also one of the key words here. What does it mean to have dialogue, right? What does it mean to have? And for me, one of the most important aspects of dialogue as a concept, right, as a communicative concept, is the ability to mutually understand each other, to mutually see eye to eye, not necessarily to agree, right, but sometimes to agree to disagree, right? And that is important for there to be a dialogue, right? So not speaking at each other, not speaking demeaning people, right? But speaking with, right, people. That is essential for having a dialogue. And it could be difficult, as we all know, it could be difficult, particularly because of the platform, particularly because of the lack of that rich medium, which sometimes, so if you're not using, for instance, face-to-face communication, or if you are not using video, for instance, a lot of the cues are lost, right, in the text that we use when we are communicating. If it's just communication via text, it becomes difficult to invoke a lot of the cues that make the communicative interaction more meaningful. And that sometimes could be one of the challenges. But I don't think, even in the absence of that, I don't think that dialogue is not possible. I think Amanda is here.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah, going back.
Oh, great. So maybe before you go ahead and answer the first question, do you want to introduce yourself, and then you can answer the next question? Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Amanda Odre, and I work with the University of Texas. I'm a research fellow with the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy, and Documentation. I think that'll do for now.
Okay. So Eric, before you join us, Eric did answer the first question. So do you want to go ahead and answer the first question, and then I can end with that, and I can end with what I also think, or?
Okay. On what it means to have a productive dialogue.
Yes.
Okay. For me, I think it's about being accommodating of every other person's opinions and views while you're communicating. So most of the we come to conversations with and different understandings. So to have productive dialogue, so needs to be open to people's perspectives and welcoming about people's views, such that the conversation becomes mutual and respectful.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then I'll go ahead and talk about mine as well. So for me, when I'm thinking about what it means to have a productive dialogue, I'm also thinking about the features of dialogue. So what should maybe be the features of dialogue in order for us to even get to something called productivity, or a very productive dialogue, and which is what Eric was mentioning earlier. What does it even mean to have this productive part of dialogue? So I tend to think about four. I'm going to talk about 4 different features. And the first feature that I want to mention is to think about active listening as part of engaging in a productive dialogue. And sometimes, and this happens to me a lot, even in Ghana, when I was in Ghana, when we are listening to respond, we're not really listening to understand, but we're listening to respond. And I think for a dialogue to be productive, you need to listen to understand. At least that will be the first step here. And also I'm also thinking about understanding in terms of understanding the content of what is being said, and also the background of the person who is saying that, and then also the context. So sometimes some people might say things, depending on the context of where they're saying it, a particular meaning also emerges from there. So it's very important for us to think about when we are engaging in some form of dialogue, we should also think about engaging in a very deep approach. We should take a deep approach to understanding. The next thing I also want to think about in terms of features of a productive dialogue is to think about vulnerability, because when you are engaging in dialogue with somebody and you do want to understand what they're saying, then yes, you also want to be vulnerable in the sense that share information and also share your fears and share what the other person's comment scares you about, what scares you about the other person's comment. So being vulnerable is also going to be very interesting. The last 2 things I do want to point out is being open-mindedness. And I know sometimes the open-mindedness is sort of an overdone word. People say it all the time. You have to be open-minded. But I think here, what I'm trying to point out is that you are open to be challenged. You are open for your thoughts to be challenged. Not necessarily to sort of change your mind per se, but you are open to receive a different information. You're open to challenging what else you knew. So I think open-mindedness is a huge part, or is a huge feature of engaging in a productive dialogue. The last thing I want to point out also is to think about the power relations between the two of you, or even the three of us. And for you to have a productive dialogue, there should be the assumption that we are all sort of meeting each other on an equal footing. When somebody is the manager, or the person is the boss, and you're the worker. I mean, sometimes it will be very difficult for us to have productive dialogue. So I think being cognizant of the fact that we have power relations, we are both coming from different power status, is going to be very important for us. So that will be my sort of feature, and also conception of what it means to be, or to have a productive dialogue.
And I want to touch back on just a little bit about the open-mindedness, right? That it's so true. Sometimes we say that, and we all say it. I mean, I can't think of anyone I know who is opposed to being open-minded about literally anything, but actually operationalizing the open-mindedness always becomes the challenge, right? It's like we say it all the time, but when it actually gets to being open-minded, we're like, oh, no, this is how it's supposed to be done. This is what you're supposed to think. No, right? If you are open. So, and one key thing is that, so like Godfrey said, it's not, being open-minded is not to say that you need to change your mind about something. You don't need to change your mind about anything, right? I believe that we all, based on our experiences and background and so on, we all have these biases that we literally cannot do anything about. Right? But the way that we invoke those biases in our day-to-day interactions with other people is where the key component of this dialogue is. That you don't need to change your mind about what you think. But being open-minded, once again, to the point that Godfrey was making, is simply to say, I'm willing for you to tell me what it is that I don't already know. I'm willing for you to tell me what it is that I haven't already considered based on my very specific position within this society or within this issue that we're talking about, right? So that's a little bit that I wanted to add to that response.
Right, absolutely. Anything else, Amanda, that you want to add before we move on to the next question?
I think it's about power relations, but most of it as Ghanaians, so people talk to you, and then these adults, younger person relationships, so they think that everything they are saying is what is ultimate, and so even if you have an opinion, you are just shut up. So I think it's very important, like you mentioned, that we pay attention to power relations, and also when we are talking to people, sometimes it depends on the topic of discussion. Some of us come to those conversations with expertise in those fields, so you're more likely, like Eric mentioned, to have biases as to the responses you're going to get from people. So we should ask, because we try to be open to, it doesn't matter the age of the person. I think everybody has an understanding of the issues we discuss, so we should be open and not let our expertise in that field, our age and all that, make it impossible to open up for other people to engage in the kind of conversations or dialogues we have in with them.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
I also wanna chip in here, not specifically that. I wanna chip in here to our viewers, people who have joined us. Want to say thank you for joining us. This is the very first episode, so we are so grateful that you made the time to join us. But to also say that if there's things that you want to say, questions you want to ask, things you want to contribute to this conversation, we are by no means the ultimate experts on this. I mean, that's not what we are claiming. So, of course, we welcome your comments and your questions on any of these issues as well. All right, we have some. Great. So, do we move on to the next question?
Yes.
All right. So, what makes social media interactions different? We're talking about social media, right? And we're talking about all of like dialogue on social media and so on. What makes social media interaction different? Is the social media environment conducive to productive dialogue in the first place?
Oh my God, I have so much to say about this. It's like, I think there are some aspects of social media that which does not allow, and here, social media, I'm referring to the Facebooks and the Twitters, where most of us go to engage in some form of dialogue with people who are different from us. But I think the structure of, for instance, Facebook, is different from the structure of maybe, for instance, Twitter, which Twitter, because of the limitations on the characters that you can use, it's very difficult for you to actually respond adequately. I find myself having to rewrite a very what I want to say. I find myself revising it several times because of the limitations. So sometimes it's very difficult to say what you want to say, especially on Twitter. Now, Facebook, you have the space to say a lot, but I think on the other hand, we should also consider the way that, because of the business models of these social media sites, we tend to encounter people who think like us. So over time, we're in a bubble, because we're seeing posts from people who maybe, for instance, I tend to see things from Occupy movement, and I'm like, okay, cool, yes, what you're saying makes sense. So I'm seeing things that actually validate my opinion rather than challenge it, and I think that is a problem. So eventually, when I meet somebody or when I encounter people on social media whose views are at this point are so radically different from mine, I'm like, where have you been? Why don't you know these things, or why aren't you aware of these things? So I think on a more structural macro level, the social media platforms themselves are not conducive for dialogue, I think, because the model, because based on the model, we are already in our little cocoons in different spots. So we're not seeing things that actually challenge us. And I think the challenging here does not necessarily mean that, again, as we mentioned earlier, that we sort of believe everything that we hear, but it helps you to also sort of harness your own position, because it's like sharpening a tool. If you don't hear other people's perspectives for a long time, you don't really sharpen your tool as much. But once you begin to hear other people's perspectives, then you feel more confident even in your own stance. But if you've not heard anybody's perspective, or you've not even considered it, and then all of a sudden somebody maybe tells it to you, the first response is disorientation, because you're like, oh my goodness, people like you exist. So I think for me, I don't think the social media environment is necessarily that conducive for us to have adequate dialogue. I think it's good for us to share our opinions, but ultimately it's not that conducive. And I stand to be challenged on that. I just don't think it is.
We have some wonderful comments in here. I don't know if we want to read some of the comments. So for instance, one of the things that I wanted to, my comment was hinged on is what Denise is saying, right? The delusion of anonymity, right? That because you don't know me and you can't find me probably, right? I can say whatever I want to you, whether it makes sense or not, as offensive or not as it is, I can say it and I can get away with it, right? something you would not have said to that same person if they were right in front of you, right? Even if they were on video with you, you probably would not have said that. But that delusion, right, or the fact that you feel anonymous in that environment becomes a big part of why I think a lot of people, why fundamentally social media interactions are different from, before social media happened. This is not how we were interacting, right? And so it becomes significantly different in the way that it allows for communication. And we can talk about that business model, but I want to know what Amanda has to say about this.
Comments that are coming in. So a personal experience I want to share about this issue of anonymity. I was on one of the platforms and somebody made a post about it's just like love making, and the fact that if you're making love and you speak in the Ghanaian way, like you're using Ghanaian names is not so romantic. So I think he used Ghana names or something, and then it just figured. So I said, no, it's just the speaking in a Western name. So you're thinking of making love in English. So I responded in Ghana, and then it had a lot of responses. So I was like, so if you're like, for instance, if you're making love and the person is maybe Kote or something, you don't have to say Kote and in English you just like, so you just have to relate to a Gawe because there's a reason why it's a Gawe you're dealing with. And then somebody said, you're going to tell everybody that I was a PhD for them. I was like, oh, I don't care because nobody knows me. And that's something I respect so much. I didn't know that person was on the same platform. But then I said, well, me, I know you. I was so shy. I was like, it wasn't a response I gave was wrong. But I just felt like, okay, I thought I was the issue of anonymity, not really use me as and just have fun and cruise and go and all that. But coming back to the first thing, I think what makes social media interactions different is because we have wireless audience. Like you're coming in contact with so many conversations at the same time, so sometimes it's very difficult to maneuver. And also you are dealing with different people at the same time, which makes it a bit difficult sometimes to take the time to have a convincing and constructive conversation with one particular person to make them understand the issues you are dealing with at the same time. So for instance, if you're on, for me, I feel the social media platforms also differ. If you're on Facebook, the level of interaction you have there is really different from Twitter. The group of people on Twitter are in a world of their own. And those on Facebook, for me, based on the experience, are a bit calm. So they are open and receptive to other people's opinion. But for Twitter, it's like Banana Republic. Everybody has an opinion. So I think it's also because of the various platforms we dealing with. That's what makes social media interactions different. So as I was mentioning, if I know you and we're having a certain conversation, I'm open to a certain level of discussion because I know who you are. And then all of a sudden, I encounter somebody that's like 16-year-old, and I need to now take my time and break down the issues and make the person understand. And if you don't have that level of patience or the tools to be able to engage a younger person, it makes it very difficult. But it's not like we are so different from the everyday life that we encounter so many issues at the same time, which makes it very difficult for us to have that kind of productive dialogue. And the people are coming at you also because of anonymity with like very vocal words. Sometimes you're taking about like, who you know what this person is saying, and then you're confused as to how to respond and all that. So those are some of the things that make it make it a bit different in our everyday interaction as against social media interaction and issues of productive dialogue.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I have so many examples. I was thinking about the example you gave us, and I have so many of these examples of interactions on social media. Thankfully, I don't even have to talk about them here. But yeah, social media interactions. Well, I guess one that I would share is from probably 3 or more years ago now. It was on Twitter, and one very popular, and he's still popular in Ghana right now. He's a comedian. He said something. He tweeted something on social media on Twitter, and it was he. I mean, because he's comedian, I'm thinking at that time I was like, this is supposed to be funny, right? But it's not. It's misogynistic. It's sexist. Why would you think this is funny? So I went on there. I replied to the tweet and I said, dude, this is not funny. You can. There's definitely other kinds of things you can make a lot of jokes about, which would be so funny, so much more funny, so much more appropriate. This is not funny. This is not appropriate. So don't do that, right? That's not the tweet, but that was the crux of the tweet. And so he did what, and I just recently found the name they used for it. I think last week he did what they call pylon. I don't know if you guys have heard. So a pylon, as in pile and on, P-I-L-E, right? So a pylon on social media is when you say something, you make a comment, and someone tags other people in their response to you, so that those people will come and kind of attack you, right? On his or her behalf. So basically, that's what he did. He didn't need to respond to me, right? But he did. So he replied to my tweet and basically said, "Yo," and he tagged like 4 or 5 of his gang to basically come and attack me for making the comment that I made, right? Instead of maybe I would have thought, right, that you would at that time like engage me somehow, and I wasn't expecting it. You either engage me the way you should or you ignore me. I mean, I wasn't even expecting that. I just made a comment. I'm like, I saw this, it irritated me, I needed to say something, and I said it, right? And that's the point of social media to some extent, right? That especially for these celebrity accounts. So I wasn't expecting a response from him. I was just saying what I had to say. I wanted other people to see it. To see that the joke he made wasn't funny, the joke he made was inappropriate. There's so many different things. I mean, I love comedy, so I don't have anything against making jokes. I make jokes all the time, but you can definitely find jokes that are not like denigrating other groups of people and so on. So I just went to comment on that. I just wanted to call him out. But he responded and he did this pylon where he tagged a bunch of his friends, and then they came in. I had to mute it because they basically came in and abused me without reference to anything that I had said, right? They did not refer to the substantive issue that I had raised. They did not say anything about what I had said. They just came on and insults. And I muted it. I mean, that wasn't the first time I'd seen something like that on social media, so it wasn't really something that I lost sleep over. But I thought it was interesting that happens, and that pylon situation. And but I guess that also leads us into one of our other questions, or the next question. You want to take that, Amanda?
The next question we are looking at is like, after having identified all these challenges you have on social media, how do you remain civil and engage in productive dialogue on social media? How do you think you can do that? So maybe the first start.
Yeah, sure. So, I always use an approach that I use in my classrooms, which is as simple as tell me more. I just say, tell me more, because, going back to what Eric was talking about, and also what Denise mentioned in the Facebook chat, sometimes, the room for anonymity makes people think that they could say anything they want. And also the idea that somehow, opinions, it's just my opinion, even if the opinion is faulty, even if the opinion is based on some historical inaccuracies or flat out misinformation. But the social media platform allows us to just sort of make that statement, and somehow I'm supposed to agree wholeheartedly in some way without necessarily challenging it. And then, it seems so. So for me, what I do is, I always say, just tell me more, because I think the problem with contradictions, or a way to sort of help somebody untangle contradiction is to just let them talk about it. I have, I have a friend I keep on Facebook because I just want to be able to see what the other people on the other side of the political spectrum, what are they saying? And so I still keep most of my friends who are liberals, conservatives, independents, whatsoever, because what they post allows me to sort of think about how I can also strengthen my position. So what I do is there was one time I actually had to intervene because what this person was saying, it was flat out misinformation. So I said, well, what you're saying is actually not accurate. I want you to admit that it is not accurate. And it seems like, and I think the sad part of even that approach is somebody might say, well, go do your research because I've done my research. But most of the time what I do is I'm actually very, I try to stay calm as much as I can. And I tried to be calm, I would say, not necessarily civil, but I try to be calm. And the only thing I say is, tell me more. Tell me more. How did you come to this perspective? How did you know this information? Because every time I hear any misinformation online, and I ask them to tell me more, somebody will say, I did my research. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm a researcher too. And you did your research. Awesome. Tell me, where did you find this information from? And then the response might be, I got it from Facebook or I got it from WhatsApp. But then that helps me to understand that they are not necessarily, stupid or anything. It's the assumption that I got the information from Facebook. I got the information from WhatsApp. So it is a legitimate source. So when, again, which, yes, it takes time, it takes a little bit more practice, but in that sense, I'm like, okay, well, that when you find information on WhatsApp, when you find information on Facebook, it doesn't make it legitimate. So then they begin to sort of think through it a little bit more, and then they'll say, okay, well, I got this information from this source, and then I'm like, well, let's evaluate this source. So I think at the end of the day, my approach is a little bit cumbersome, and but I only do that with people that I really want to continue with, not just anybody, right? If I don't care about your statement, I'm just going to move on. But if I care about the person, I would definitely ask them questions, and questions are really helpful. Once you begin to ask people questions like, tell me more, where did you get your information from? Right? And then once they tell you where they got the information from, typically they will also, then they begin to sort of think through and unravel things a little bit. So I stay calm that way, knowing that the person is just, basing their whole topic or idea on misinformation. How can I help them get access to the right information? Yeah.
So thank you. So I was thinking about this misinformation and disinformation situation, right? And let's get something straight. We are living in, when it comes to information, we are living in probably the most turbulent, chaotic period in history, right? When it comes to information and particularly misinformation, right? And that's because we are living in that age where information is not hard to find. I remember my dad used to tell me stories about when he was in the university and like basically school, like all his school life, basically, right? That he would go to the library and go sit down, and he would have to go look for a particular book, and maybe the library had 2 copies and they were not there, and so he needed that, because that's the only way you would find that information, right? Is if you went to, at that time, right, in the, I don't know, 60s, 70s, right? That's how you would, I'm aging my dad here. That's how you would find information. There was no other way to find information. You had to go to the library, you had to read newspapers, like print sources, right? And they were not as widespread. At that time, there was a problem of the information itself being available. We don't have that problem. We actually have too much of it. And the problem with too much of it is that sometimes we can't even decipher what is the truth and what is the lie, right? I even shared this on social media a few months ago. I went to the barber shop, and this was not on social media actually, but it's part of the misinformation conversation. I went to the barber shop. My barber, who I have since not gone to, I have switched barbers because of that conversation. But I went to the barber shop, and this barber was spewing a whole lot of conspiracies about Hillary Clinton and running a pedophile organization who kidnap kids in Haiti, and I'm like, okay, so where did you hear this information? Because I think I'm pretty current when it comes to these things, and I like politics, but I haven't heard this, all of this stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, it was on TV. It was on TV. I was like, where on TV did you hear this? He couldn't tell me, but going back to that point, the fact that something is on the internet, the fact that something is on TV does not make it true. And it's so difficult to have a civil conversation. And I'm not going to lie to you. It's so difficult to have to keep a level head, when you're having a conversation with someone who, to begin with, is coming into this conversation with the wildest conspiracy theories or bouts of misinformation you've ever heard. Where do you even start? Like they make you sometimes I'm like, I don't even know where to begin when you start with an assumption like that. I don't even know where I can begin to argue this, right? If this is what you're saying, like the COVID hoax, for instance, right? Now it's better, but when COVID started, all of the news and interactions on particularly on social media, about how this is a hoax and it has to do with 5G and these people who are trying to control us, and there's this, cabal of rich people who are somewhere who are trying to, sell vaccines to us, and which is why they manufactured this. I'm like, come on, yeah, I mean, I'm not naive to the point where I don't think that there's people who are who have a grand agenda about things, but I don't think this is one of them, right? Just based on the fact that we've heard so much from very reliable scientists about what is happening. So that's an example. And it's so difficult when you have to engage with people like that. Sometimes, to be honest with you, I walk away. And I think, this is just my suggestion, I think that sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do for yourself and for the other person.
Okay. So actually do walk away sometimes as well, but you realize that sometimes these people that are putting up presidential information are people with huge followings. So whatever people get from there, they take to be the truth from this misinformation goes out there. So Abraham was also making the same point that people with a huge following are mostly the culprits for these issues. So it becomes very difficult to walk away. Because if you do, then you're leaving people open to get this false information. So in Timothy is asking, where do we get correct information? If we are ready to walk away, if we know this misinformation is out there, but sometimes because we don't know how to deal with it, we have to walk away, then where do they go to? How do they get access to the right information?
I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I mean,
sorry, I might have missed Amanda's question a little bit. Are you asking if we walk away, how do they also get access to the information?
Yes, because Timothy is asking where they can get access to correct information on any matter.
Yeah, it's in response to like she's asking in Timothy's question in the chat, right? About how and where do we get correct information on any matter?
I see. I see. Can I respond, or will you respond?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, so you know what? I think I'm trying to answer this question in a different way. So I think that this is one of the issues that I have seen, especially with regards to Ghanaian journalism, and my disenchantment with what I read online, especially when I go to my Joy Online, Daily Graphic, Daily Guide. And somehow I believe that journalists should be able to provide an assessment of information. And I think, as communication people, or even those who are mostly in the humanities, we are taught to assess. How do you evaluate if one information and find out whether this information has loopholes, or whether this information is a flat out lie? And yes, now we have a whole lot of information out there. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to really maybe go back to the basics of how do we actually help people assess information. Is a flat out lie. And yes, now we have a whole lot of information out there. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to really maybe go back to the basics of how do we actually help people assess information. Because you need to be able to assess information